coming up on the Solemnity of Christ the King, which is kind of the center of the seasons. This feast or celebration was established by Pope Pius XI in 1925, and he did it to counteract a couple of things. First of all, a kind of a sweet, saccharine type of piety where, you know, we have our sweet Jesus and our own private Jesus, and it's just everything has got to be so saccharine sweet. That was one extreme. The other extreme he established this celebration was to counteract what we call totalitarianism, the fact that the government, the state is everything, and everybody, your dignity only comes insofar as you are contributing something to the state. And of course, out of this totalitarianism, we have Soviet communism, we have socialism and fascism in Italy, and Nazism. Of course, we're very well of that. To counteract these two influences, as early as 1925, this is before the Nazis ever came to power, but in 1925, Pope Pius XI established this feast. He wanted us to have a solid piety, a solid spiritual life that isn't just me and sweet Jesus, but it is based upon the whole revelation of God and the coming of Christ and Christ's redemption, and the fact that our whole life is to be centered in Him. At the same time, he wanted to tell us the government isn't everything. The state is not everything. You have a human dignity that transcends any government or any state. So he established this celebration, and the celebration at the time he established it in 1925 was the Sunday that was closest to the Feast of All Saints, which All Saints is November 1st, so this would be the last Sunday in October. After the Second Vatican Council, this celebration was moved to be the last Sunday in what we call ordinary time, and the Sunday before Advent, Sunday before the beginning of Advent. Now, let's face it, kings and queens aren't very relevant nowadays. I mean, I don't know a king, a queen, but there are a lot of other words that we use that aren't very relevant either, you know. Lord, Savior, Messiah, Redeemer, and so on. But the king seemed to express what he wanted to express, that Jesus is supposed to be the master and the Lord over my life, over everything I think and say and do. And that's the way I think, that's the way I speak, that's the way I act, hopefully. But is king really relevant now? I don't know. I'm not sure. But if you use the word Christ the King, it means He is going to be the master of my life. That everything that I do, He is going to be, is totally dedicated to Him. Maybe we can come up with some other expression. The New Testament uses all kinds of theologies or all kinds of expressions to try to describe the role of Jesus. He's Lord. Well, that means He's master, huh? He is, in the Jewish concept, of Messiah. Messiah means the anointed one. He is the one that God intended to be anointed, king, prophet, priest, the one who was the promised one to fulfill all the hopes of Judaism. Well, let's face it, that word Messiah doesn't mean much to us now. He is Savior. Well, Savior from what or for what? In the old days, Savior, what? Save me from a shipwreck, save me from this. But meaning Savior, to save me from hell, to save me for what I am intended to be, namely to share God's life forever. Redeemer. He is the one, if we ever get to heaven, it's not because we've done anything, it's because Christ has saved us and redeemed us by His suffering, death, resurrection, ascension. The New Testament uses the word suffering servant. The Jews, of course, thought when the Messiah came, he would be triumphant at all times. He couldn't suffer, he couldn't die. Well, the church had a problem because they knew Jesus died. So they looked in the book of Isaiah and found 4 poems called the Suffering Servant poems that describe one who carries our sorrows and bore our griefs, and who's kind of an everyman figure. He bears our sufferings, and through suffering, He heals us. So there are different titles and different theology of Jesus. The one the Pope used for this to express the fact, be Lord of my life, is King, Christ the King. So the feast has been moved now at the celebration to this kind of, it impinges on the, whether we have a liturgical year, whether we don't. It's the last Sunday of what we call the church year, and just before the beginning of the church year in Advent. By this, then let's fulfill the meaning of the feast. that my piety, my spiritual life is not just going to be a lot of pious practices and sweet Jesus and mouthing nice saccharine things, but he is going to be totally and completely in charge of my life in the context always of the church. And secondly, this is not only for my private life, this is in society, that everything that I do in politics, in my social life, in my political life, everything will always have that dimension. Christ is ruler and King and Lord.